It was an ordinary night in the Sound Desert, when the dense silence of dawn was broken by shouts that would forever change the life of a family. In the house of the Ramirez, in Hermosillo, the air conditioner fought in vain against the persistent heat of the region, while Carmen slept deeply. Until suddenly, Isabella's distressed voice, her 4-year-old daughter, drew her from sleep. It was not the scared cries typical of a child who wakes up with a nightmare. There was something in those shouts that fringed the pimple. "Mom, Mom, don't leave me here, there's a lot of smoke." Barefoot, Carmen ran through the cold floor hallway, the heart beating rapidly. As he opened his daughter's bedroom door, he found Isabella sitting on the bed, wide eyes, but with a distant look, as if seeing something beyond that environment. "Calm down, my love, it was just a bad dream," he tried to calm his mother, approaching with caution. But the girl stared at her with an intensity that did not match her young age. His brown eyes shone, moist with tears, but also loaded with unusual lucidity. "It wasn't a dream, Mom. I've been here before. I've been your daughter." The words fell like a weight on Carmen's chest. She sat on the edge of the bed, feeling her legs tremble. Isabella had always been a normal child, playful, full of energy, who loved dolls and cartoons. Nothing made her predict that moment. "What are you saying, Isabella? What do you mean, my daughter?" he asked, trying to understand. The girl wiped her nose with her hand and responded with clarity that cut the night. "Before, I called myself Sophia. I was smaller than I am now. One day, there was a fire in my little school, a lot of smoke, and I couldn't get out." Carmen felt the world stop. Sophia was the name of her first daughter, lost 10 years earlier in the tragic fire of the ABC Daycare Center. The girl who never had a chance to grow, to run for that same corridor or sleep in that same room, now occupied by Isabella. The tinnitus of the air conditioning continued, but suddenly it seemed to come from far away, as if reality had become a distorted dream. "Isabella, how do you know about Sophia?" he asked with a shaky voice. The answer came firm, almost adult, "Because I am Sophia, Mom. But now I'm bigger and I have another name." The girl nestled in her mother's arms, but her voice had a seriousness that did not match her 4 years. "Upstairs, I was told that I could go back to stay with you and Dad. But I warned that when I came back, I would remember everything that happened that day." Carmen hugged her tightly, trying to cling to the familiar smell of chamomile shampoo in her daughter's hair, as if it could bring her back to normal. But normality had become unknown. From the next room came the heavy steps of Roberto, her husband, aroused by the screams. His voice, hoarse by sleep, echoed through the hall. "What happened? Isabella is okay?" Carmen didn't know what to answer. "How do you explain that your 4-year-old daughter claimed to be the reincarnation of her sister who lost a decade ago?" Isabella released from the hug and stared at her mother. "Mom, I need to tell everything that happened that day. I need to tell the truth about what I saw in fire." The digital clock at the bedside table scored 3h47. Outside, Hermosillo slept, oblivious to the mystery or madness that had just settled in the Ramirez house. Roberto appeared at the door, his unrest hair and his eyes half circled against the light of the lamp. Man of robust stature, mechanic by profession, used to solving problems with logic and action, he was not prepared for that. "Another nightmare?" he asked, approaching the bed. Carmen looked at him with a silent despair in his eyes, not knowing where to start. Isabella, however, turned to his father with that same mature look for his age. "It wasn't nightmare, Dad. I remember when I was Sophia." Roberto froze. Sophia's name in that house was like evoking a ghost. Since the 2009 tragedy, they barely mentioned him. The pain had been unbearable, too real. "Isabella, dear," he tried, with careful voice, "Sophia was. She's no longer with us anymore." "Yes, I am, Dad," answered the girl, rising in bed, the feet sinking into the mattress. "Only now I'm in this body, with this name. I know you had a picture of me. Baby, wearing a pink dress. I know Dad cried a lot after I left and that Mom didn't want to have any more children because she was afraid. Roberto felt his legs weakened. Those details had never been shared with Isabella. The photo of the pink dress was stored in a box at the bottom of the closet. His tears had been spilled in secret in the bathroom, where he thought no one saw him. And Carmen's fear of being a mother again had been a silent pact between them for years. How? He babbled. Because I took care of you from above, explained the girl. I saw you crying and wanted to hug, but I couldn't. That's why I asked to go back. A heavy silence took over the room, broken only by the constant noise of the air conditioning. Outside, a dog wore at a distance, as if even the animals were present that something extraordinary was happening. Isabella snuggled up between her parents, her hot body contrasting with the cold that had settled in the chest of Carmen and Roberto. But his eyes kept a disturbing determination. Mom, Dad, I didn't come back just to be with you. I came back because I need to tell the truth about what happened in the daycare. There are things people don't know, things someone doesn't want to know. The girl's words hung in the air like smoke, loaded with a weight that seemed to announce something bigger. The next morning, breakfast went into a tense climate. Roberto Mejia distractedly ate coffee with milk, without sipping, while Carmen passed strawberry jam on Isabella's roasted bread, almost automatic movements. The desert sun was already warming the kitchen at 7 in the morning, filtering itself by the yellow curtains that Carmen had chosen years earlier to give the environment more life. Isabella ate like any 4-year-olds, dirtying his jelly fingers and shaking his legs in his car seat, but occasionally raised his eyes and smiled with an expression that no longer looked so naive. Suddenly she wiped her mouth with the paper napkin and asked, Daddy, do you remember Professor Lupita from my school? Roberto almost choked on coffee. Professor Lupita. Guadalupe Hernandez had been Sophia's favorite educator in the ABC Daycare Center, a 25-year-old, curly hair, contagious laughter and a characteristic smell of baby talc. Isabella, you have never been there, he tried to say, but the phrase died on his lips. How to explain the inexplicable? The hurry of sleep. Seeing them with the box open and the photographs scattered on the coffee table, their eyes illuminated with a mixture of curiosity and nostalgia. It's my box, he exclaimed, running to sit between the two. Carmen, with a knot in his throat, ran his fingers through his daughter's misaligned wires, while Roberto watched, immovable, as if any movement would break the fragile balance of that moment. Isabella took a picture in black and white, where a little girl of unequal braids smiled next to a large dog. This is me with the shin, he said, pointing to the image with the little finger. Abuela took us this picture when I was 2 years old. Carmen felt her tears burning in her eyes. That photo had never been shown to Isabella. It was stored at the bottom of the album, among others that they avoided looking themselves. Mi amor, Carmen tried, with a trembling voice, how do you know this picture is yours if you've never seen her before? Isabella turned to her with such a serious expression that she seemed to belong to a much older child. Because I remember, Mommy. I remember the smell of the wet grass, the wind swinging the durazinos in the tree. And I remember that Abuela said, Sophia, it's quiet if you don't go out trembled. She laughed, a crystalline sound that contrasted with the gravity of what she was saying. I was never quiet. I always came out trembled in the pictures. Roberto took another image, a faded Polaroid from Sophia in the school, sitting in a low table with other children. In the background, a young woman with curly hair held an illustrated book. And this? Do you recognize someone here? Isabella stretched her neck, her eyes shining. Of course. This is the Maestra Lupita reading The Princess and the Frog. I love this book. Carla, she pointed to a braid girl by her side, always made the frog's voice, and we laughed so much that Maestra had to wait for us to calm down. Carmen covered his mouth with his hand. Carla Fernandez. Sophia's best friend. Killed in the fire. Never mentioned at home. Never. Isabella. Roberto hesitated, choosing the words carefully. You said early today that you remembered important things about that day. Things that adults need to know. What else do you remember? The girl looked down at her hands, playing with the Jersey bar. When he spoke, his voice was so low that they had to lean to hear. I remember the mustache man. What closed the doors? She swallowed hard. He wasn't alone. There was another man with him, younger, in a blue shirt. They said loudly, as if they were fighting. The younger said, this was not the combined, and the mustache man replied, shut up and help me lock that crap. Carmen felt the floor open under his feet. That was not in any report. No official testimony mentioned a second man. Roberto took one of the newspaper clippings, where a small photo showed the rubble of the daycare. Isabella, do you know why they did that? The girl shook her head, her eyes full of unhealthy tears. I don't know, Poppy. But I heard the mustache man say something before leaving. He said, now no one will find out what we hid in the basement. The silence that followed was so dense that it seemed to have weight. In the basement. ABC Nursery had no basement. At least, not in the original projects approved by the city. Carmen suddenly got up as if an electric current had traveled it. The documents, he murmured, addressing the bookcase where they kept a brown folder with all the papers of the lawsuit they had moved and lost against the daycare. Roberto followed her, while Isabella remained in the room, now involved in thoughtful silence, as if the effort to remember had been exhausted. Among insurance policies, technical reports and copies of testimonials, Carmen found what she was looking for, the original floor plan of the building. His fingers trembled as he passed the yellowish paper. Here it is, he said, pointing to an empty space below the main room. See. There is no marked basement. Only the foundation. Roberto took the document, examining it with his eyes half-circled. But that doesn't mean it didn't exist. It could have been an unauthorized construction. It was then that Isabella appeared at the corridor door, holding something between her hands. I found it inside my pillow, he said, extending a small metal object. It was a key. Small, rusty, with a recorded number, 107. I don't know what it is, he continued, but when I was Sophia, I kept it in the pocket of my Hello Kitty backpack. Maestra Lupita told me not to show anyone. Roberto caught her, feeling the weight of the cold metal in the palm of his hand. The number 107. The same as firefighters in the emergency report. The same one that identified the nursery file cabinet, found open after the fire. And now, the same key that could open something someone had wanted to keep hidden forever. Carmen's face with an expression between skepticism and the contained pain. The room was silent for a few seconds, filled only by the ticker of the wall clock, inherited from Roberto's grandparents. It was the same sound that had marked the endless nights after the fire, when time seemed to have stopped forever. Carmen, Elena finally broke the silence, choosing the words carefully, as if she feared that any very loud sound could break something fragile in the air. You know I've known you for years. I know you're not the type who invents stories or seeks magical explanations for what you don't understand. He paused, adjusting the thin frame glasses they slipped through his nose. But I also know how despair can make us see things that may not exist. What exactly Isabella told you? Carmen took a deep breath, as if about to dive into deep water. He told everything, the detailed memories of the daycare, the description of the mustache man, the final moments in the brightly fuzzy hall, the mention of the beautiful lady in the white and luminous place. He spoke of key number 107, the burnt files, the windows with grids that prevented the escape. Elena heard in silence, her fingers tightening the carpet on her lap until the joints got white. When Carmen finished, Elena got up unhurriedly and went to the window. He looked at the street, where children played catch, laughing as if the world did not keep secret. Unfessable. Then he turned slowly, with his eyes damp, but a new determination in his eyes. 3 years ago, he began, sitting again, a man came to me. A former employee of the city hall, already retired. He had worked on the commission that investigated the fire and, shortly before he died of cancer, wanted to clean conscience, as he said. He opened the carpet and removed a yellowish envelope, two-handled to be new. He handed me this. Copies of documents that should have been destroyed. Carmen reached out his handy hand and took the papers. They were technical reports with official stamps, photos of a structure that immediately recognized the daycare, but at an angle I had never seen before. Floor plan. With hand notes. See here, Elena pointed with her finger, the nail rolled to the cuticle. Emergency exits were marked in the original project, but someone crossed and wrote obstructed by cabinets next door. And this turned the page is the security inspection made a month before the fire. Approved. Without any observation. It makes no sense, Carmen muttered, passing her fingers over the lyrics as if she could feel the lie printed on them. If there were problems, why weren't they registered? Elena lowered her voice, as if the walls could have heard. Because someone was paid to ignore them. This same man told me that the owner of the daycare, Mr. Morera, had huge debts. Nursery was the last thing left. He closed the carpet with a dry blow. He needed the insurance. And to receive insurance, I needed an irreparable accident. Carmen felt his stomach turn around. It was not the first time I heard theories about a criminal fire, but hearing from Elena, with documents in hand, was different. It was real. And the man with mustache? He asked, his voice failing. Isabella said he wasn't the boss. Elena hesitated, then opened the carpet again and removed a 3x4 photo of a middle-aged man, thick mustache, suspicious look. This is Mario Ruiz. Worked in the maintenance of the city. Disappeared a week after the fire. It has never been seen again. He paused. But there was another name in the documents. Someone who appeared in telephone ligations to Morera's cell phone in the days before the fire. A licensed Varela. Varela. Carmen repeated, as if the name had a bitter taste. I never heard of it. Because he wasn't here, Elena explained. He was a lawyer from Sao Paulo, specializing in how to say, solve problems for wealthy people. He crossed his arms. What Isabella told you about the small phone makes sense. In 2009, cell phones were rare for workers like Ruiz, but a lawyer like Varela would surely have one. Carmen suddenly got up, as if the couch had become too hot. He went to the kitchen, filled a glass of water and drank everything at once, his hand shake so much that he poured a few drops on the floor. Then you think. He started, but the phrase died in his throat. Elena approached and held her shoulders firmly. I think your daughter may have the missing piece in this puzzle. And I think if she's right about being Sophia, then someone up there decided it was time for the truth to come out. His tone was serious, but in the eyes there was a glow that Carmen had not seen for years, hope. We need to go to the police station. Now. Before someone realizes that we are moving this again. Carmen looked at the clock. Roberto and Isabella would take an hour yet. She had time. Time to decide if I was ready to reopen wounds that had never healed or if this time it could finally close some of them. Carmen's face paled. What do you mean, you say it's Sophia? Elena opened the folder she brought with her and spread documents on the table. Carmen, all these years I kept investigating on my own. I never convinced myself with the official explanations. And I found things disturbing. He extended a black and white photograph on the coffee table. Recognize this man? Carmen analyzed the image, a corpulent middle-aged man dressed in a dark suit, next to a luxurious car in front of the ABC Daycare Center. No. Who is it? Mauricio Sandoval. State government employee in 2009. According to my investigations, he had financial ties with the company that built the daycare. Elena pulled more papers. Northern Constructors had been denounced before for using material low quality and violate safety standards. But they always passed the inspections. A shiver traveled Carmen's spine. Do you think the fire was not an accident? I don't know if it was intentional, but there was criminal neglect. And there was a cover-up. At that moment, the front door opened. The voices of Roberto and Isabella filled the house. Mom, Dad bought me a strawberry ice cream, shouted the girl, running to the living room. Suddenly stopped seeing Elena. His eyes fastened in the picture on the table. This is the lord of the beautiful car, he said naturally. Elena and Carmen exchanged a shocked look. What lord, my love? Carmen asked, the trembling voice. Isabella approached and pointed to the photo. What was talking to the director of the daycare center? He always arrived in a very large black car and was carrying a briefcase. Elena knelt next to the girl. When did you see this gentleman? When I was the Sophia. I saw him many times. Once I heard the director tell him that he was worried. Mr. Mauritius said he wouldn't worry, that everything would be fine. Roberto, who had just entered, froze. Isabella, Elena said quietly. Do you remember what else the director said? The girl sucked her finger thoughtfully. He said his parents were complaining a lot, they wanted to fix things in the daycare. And when was it? Shortly before the fire. Like a week before. Elena closed her eyes, processing. Carmen stared at her urgently. What does that mean? It means, she responded slowly, that we have the first direct testimony that Mauricio Sandoval was in the daycare center just before the fire, promising to solve safety problems. Isabella finished the ice cream and sat on Carmen's lap. Mr. Mauritius did bad thing. Elena looked at the girl with a mixture of compassion and determination. That's what we'll find out, little. Roberto approached. Elena, what do you propose? First, I need Isabella to tell me everything he remembers this man and the day of the fire. Then let's look for an investigative journalist I know. It's time for the truth to come to light. Isabella watched them with two wise eyes for her age. They will help people know the truth. Yes, my love. Exactly that. The afternoon extended as the girl, with the patience of an adult and the clarity of those who had witnessed the facts, described every detail she remembered, the conversations heard, the irregularities seen. When Elena said goodbye, she took pages of notes and the promise of coming back the next day with more questions. Carmen put Isabella in bed, singing the same song that, years earlier, singing to Sophia. Mom, the girl murmured before bed, the beautiful lady of the sky said she was going to be difficult, but it was important. What, my love? Tell the truth. But she said that you were going to protect me and that in the end everything would be fine. Carmen kissed her daughter's forehead, wondering if, in fact, everything would look good or if they just opened a door that could never be closed. The next day Elena returned accompanied by a tall, thin man, about 40, with a well-groomed beard and insightful eyes. It had a digital label and a notebook. Carmen, Roberto, this is Javier Moreno, investigative journalist of the Weekly Process. For years has been following cases of government corruption. Javier squeezed their hands seriously. Elena told me everything. I need to be frank, what you are proposing is extraordinary. But the details about Mauricio Sandoval coincide with information I have been collecting for years. They sat in the room. Isabella played in the backyard, close enough to be seen, far enough far not to hear. Mauricio Sandoval, began Javier, consulting his notes, was Undersecretary of Sonar Public Works between 2007 and 2011. During his term, he authorized the construction of several public buildings, including schools and daycare centers. He took a folder out of the briefcase. At least 5 of these buildings have had serious security problems in the last 15 years, 2 schools with structural failures, a clinic with defective electrical installations, and of course the ABC Daycare Center. Carmen felt a knot in her stomach. Did you mean he knew these buildings were dangerous? What I can prove is that it has received several reports from independent engineers warning about irregularities. All archived without corrections. Roberto leaned forward. And what happened to him after the fire? Officially, resigned 6 months later for personal reasons. Unofficially, it was discreetly transferred to a position in the Mexican embassy in Guatemala. Today lives in the city of Guatemala. Elena interfered. Javier, count on the company Constructora. North buildings belonged to the Villarreal brothers. The oldest, Arturo, was Sandoval's brother-in-law. The company gained contracts of more than 200 million pesos during his management. Javier paused to drink water. After the fire, the company went bankrupt and the brothers moved to the United States. They were never processed. Carmen took her hands to her head. Then there was a cover-up. A systematic cover-up. But we never had direct testimonies of what happened in the nursery that day. Until now. That's when Isabella entered. Isabella rushed down the hallway, the dark curls shaking at the rhythm of her agile steps. Mom has a beautiful yellow butterfly in the flowers. Carmen forced a smile, still shaken by the recent revelations. How beautiful, my love, answered, extending his hand to his daughter. Isabella, come here. Mr. Javier wants to ask you some questions. The girl approached without hesitation, analyzing the journalist with a childish but careful curiosity. Do you write in the newspapers? He asked, leaning his head. Yes, little, Javier answered, with a kind tone that contrasted with the tension in the air. I write important stories for people to know the truth. Isabella nodded seriously, as if he understood the weight of it. Like the story of what happened in my daycare when I was Sofia. Javier called the recorder carefully, looking at the girl for permission. Do you mind if I record our conversation? Isabella shook her head negatively, confident. No, you can record. Then he settled on Carmen's lap, his fingers playing with his mother's blouse as he stared at Javier directly. Aunt Elena told me that you recognized a man in a photo. Can you tell me more about him? The girl took a deep breath, as if organizing the memories on her head. Mr. Mauricio went to the daycare a lot. I always spoke to the director, Mrs. Patty, and the two looked concerned. Javier wrote down each word, the pen scratching the paper urgently. Do you remember any specific conversation? Isabella closed her eyes, as if turning in time. Once I heard them speaking in the office. I was outside because I had hurt my knee, and the teacher took me to dress. And what did they say? I encouraged Javier, containing anxiety. Mrs. Patty told Mr. Mauricio that her parents were very angry because empty water from the ceiling when it rained, that the doors crashed and that an engineer had said that the windows were not safe. The journalist stopped writing for a moment, absorbing the information. And what did Mr. Mauricio answer? Isabella frowned, as if revolving the scene. He told her not to worry, that he was going to talk to the engineer so he would no longer make problems. And if anyone else complained, it was supposed to say that everything was perfectly well. A chill traveled the room. Carmen squeezed her daughter against her, as if she wanted to protect her from the very words that came out of her mouth. Roberto cleared his fists, the joints of the white fingers of such strong. Javier, however, kept his voice calm, though his hands shake lightly. And did you see Mr. Mauricio on the day of the fire? Isabella denied her head, but then hesitated, as if something had returned to her memory. No, that day I only saw the Lord of Mustache closing the doors. He paused, his eyes wide. But, Carmen encouraged her with a soft touch on her arm. But what, my love? But the day before the fire, I saw him. The girl's voice was firm, despite the seriousness of what she said. He arrived early, before the children. I arrived early because Mom had a medical appointment and left me there since 7. Elena leaned forward, absorbed. What was he doing so soon? He asked, his voice. He was talking to the mustache lord, which fixed things. I was giving him some papers and money. Javier dropped the pen. Are you sure it was money? Isabella nodded solemn. I saw notes, many notes. The mustache lord kept everything on his tool bag. And what did they say? He pressed Javier, now without disguising the urgency. The girl bit her lip, concentrated. The evil lord. Riccio told the mustache lord that the next day he had to do something very important. That I had to make sure no one could leave until the firefighters arrived. The silence that followed was so dense that it seemed to suffocate the air. Javier had stopped writing down, looking at Isabella with an expression that mixed astonishment and pure horror. Did he say exactly that he had to prevent people from leaving? Confirmed, the voice hoarse. Yes. The girl looked down for a moment, but soon lifted them, firm. And I told him to leave fast afterwards and never tell anyone that they had said. Roberto got up, the chair gritting against the floor. That means, I couldn't finish the sentence. That the fire was planned, Elena added, the trembling voice of contained fury. Who murdered 49 children on purpose. Javier hung up the recorder with hands that would not stop shaking. If this is true, we are talking about the most abject crime in the recent history of Mexico. Isabella looked at the adults, the eyes full of a concern that did not match her age. I did the wrong thing telling you? Carmen hugged her hard, her fingers sinking into her daughter's curls. No, my love. You did something very brave. Very important. Are they going to punish the bad gentleman? Asked the girl, with a simplicity that broke the heart. Javier kept his equipment with a determination that left no room for doubt. Let's do everything in our reach, small. All. The call fell. Roberto got the phone in hand, the trembling fingers of anger and impotence. The tense face muscles, as if at any moment they were breaking. What did they say? Asked Carmen, the voice a thread of anxiety. He looked at Isabella, who watched them with two big eyes for that serious face. Roberto swallowed hard. Threats. A dry, sharp word. They want us to stop collaborating with the investigation. Carmen took her hands to her mouth, as if she could contain the fear she threatened to overflow. Roberto. What if it's dangerous? His voice failed. What if they do something with Isabella? The daughter's name came out as a prayer, like a lament. It was then that the bell sounded. Through the window, they saw Elena coming, accompanied by Javier and a man who did not know tall, with traits marked by the experience, but with a look that conveyed calm. Roberto opened the door before they played again. Elena, thank God you came. They just threatened us. I imagined, said Elena, going with quick steps. So it brought Luis Hernandez. Pointed to the unknown. Lawyer specializing in human rights. Luis squeezed Carmen and Roberto's hands firmly, as sequel gesture could convey security. Elena put me aware of everything, he explained, the serious but serene voice. First, what you are doing is incredibly brave. Second, here, paused, looking at each one in the eye. We're here to protect them. Isabella, who hitherto watched in silence, approached the group. Are you going to make the bad gentleman hurt us? The question was simple, but carried the weight of a fear that no child should know. Louise crouched down, staying at her time. Come on, little. This is our work. Javier was already taking the label out of his pocket. We need to record all the threats they received. And I have news. His tone was of those who finally saw a crack of light. We located Aurelio Vasquez. Carmen took her hand to her chest, as if the name was a punch. The mustache lord. Same. The caregiver in charge of the daycare center? Himself, confirmed Javier. He lives in Tijuana under false identity, but we find him. And you are willing to speak, in exchange for protection. Elena sat next to Isabella, taking her small hands between her own. Honey, would you do something very important? The girl looked at her, attentive. Let's record a video. You will tell your whole story so that if something happens to us, the world knows the truth. Isabella turned to her parents, seeking permission. Carmen nodded, the tears dripping without control. "Only if you want, my love." "I want," answered the girl, with a determination that did not match her 7 years. The beautiful lady said it was very important for people to know the truth. That many children like me need justice. In the next 2 hours, the room became a makeshift studio. Isabella, with a clarity that left the adults without breath, reported every detail he kept in memory, the conversations between Mauricio Sandoval and the director, the money exchanged with Aurelio Vasquez, the blocked emergency doors, the final minutes before the fire. When he finished, Luis kept copies of the video in pen drives, hard disks, digital clouds. "This will be sent to international human rights organizations, to the National Commission, for the press in several countries," he explained, while typing quickly. "Even if they try to shut up here, the story will leak. There is no way to stop it now." Elena embraced Isabella tightly. "Thank you, little. What you did today can change the lives of many families who, like ours, have been fighting for justice for years." The girl smiled, a tired but true smile. "Now they will not be able to hurt more children." "If all goes well," Javier added, with a sparkle in his eyes that wasn't there before, "they won't be able to hurt anyone else." That night the Ramirez barely closed their eyes. Each noise made them shudder, a car passing, a branch scratching the window, the wind knocking on the door. But among fear, there was something new in the air, the feeling that for the first time in a long time they were on the right side of the story. Around 3 in the morning, Isabella appeared in her parents' room, bare feet making almost no noise on the floor. "Mom, Dad, can I sleep with you?" "Of course, my love," Carmen murmured, pushing the covers away. The girl nestled between them, too small for so much courage. "I dreamed of the beautiful lady again," confessed, her voice already heavy with sleep. Roberto stroked his hair. "What did she say this time?" Isabella yawned. "That my work almost over. That I will soon be just Isabella." He paused, as if the words were going to leave. "Without having to remember Sophia's sad things." Carmen squeezed her against her, as if he could protect her from everything, from the past, the future, the world. "Is that what you want? Failing to remember?" "I want," whispered the girl, already a little sleeping. "I want to be a normal child. But first I have to finish helping Sophia, and all the other children." Roberto and Carmen were awake until the sun rises, silent watchmen of the sleep of his extraordinary daughter. They knew that the next day would bring the final battle against those who had buried the truth under lies and fear for years. But for the first time, they were not alone. And that made all the difference. "Do you fully understand what you got?" He gave a voice to 49 children who died without being able to tell their stories. Isabella smiled with that smile that gradually became only hurt. "No shadows of the past, no echoes of a life that wasn't yours. The beautiful lady told me that when all was over, Sophia could rest in peace." "And you?" asked Carmen, carefully holding her daughter's small hands. "You'll be able to rest now." Isabella shook her head seriously, as something very important was pondering. "I don't need to rest, Mom. I need to play. I need to go to school. I need to be a normal girl." A year later, the court finally arrived. Mauricio Sandoval was sentenced to 40 years in prison for qualified murder. The Villarreal brothers received 25 years each. Patricia Morfin, whose collaboration had been decisive to unravel the crime network, had her sentence reduced to 8 years. When the sentences were read aloud in court, Isabella was in school, drawing a sun with pencil. Carmen and Roberto, with a special authorization from the director, went to pick her up early. "Have you ever said if the bad lords go to jail?" she asked, as soon as she got into the car, still with the drawing notebook on her lap. "Yes, my love," Roberto answered, adjusting the rearview mirror to see her better. "They will stay there for a long time." Isabella nodded, pleased. "Well, now they can't hurt more children." That night, after dinner, Isabella approached Carmen as she washed the dishes. Mom, I don't think I'm going to remember things when I was Sophia. Carmen felt something move inside her chest, a mixture of relief and a sweet twinge of longing. How do you know? Because yesterday I dreamed of her, Isabella explained, touching her cheek on her mother's arm. She told me thank you. Said now I can be just Isabella. Will you miss her? Carmen asked, drying his hands on the dishcloth so. Clamp it. Isabella thought for a moment, lightly frowning her forehead. A little bit. But I'm also happy to be just me. Carmen pulled her close, feeling for the first time in years that she really had her daughter back. Do not Sophia reborn. Not a child charged by memories of others. But Isabella unique, unrepeatable, finally free. Roberto arrived from the workshop and found them shrunk on the couch, like a hot nest. How is my girl? He asked, kneeling in front of them. Well, Dad, said Isabella, smiling. Very good. That night Isabella slept deeply. No dreams with bright white places. No visits by gentle ladies. No memories of lives that weren't yours. For the first time since he had a memory, he dreamed of girls, his dolls, the friends of the school, the strawberry ice cream that his father had promised for the weekend. And somewhere in the universe, 49 small souls finally found the peace they sought more than a decade ago. Carmen and Roberto also slept quietly, knowing that her extraordinary daughter had fulfilled a mission she had chosen her even before she was born. And that now, finally, it could only be what they always wanted to be, a happy, safe and loved child. Isabella Ramirez's story has become a study case for researchers of paranormal phenomena, reincarnation experts and criminologists from around the world. But for Carmen and Roberto, in addition to all the attention of the media and social impact, what mattered was that his daughter had done something that many adults couldn't get in a lifetime. He found his purpose and fulfilled him. And now, finally, it could be just a girl.